Have you ever had a close friend become a murderer? We were tight, my friend and I, but he was drowning in a sea of drugs and alcohol. He and his girlfriend, someone he didn't really love, unexpectedly became parents when she had a baby. The little one had breathing issues right from the start, treated with antibiotics. But one night, everything changed. The baby stopped breathing, just like that, while everyone else slept. Fast forward 2 years, and my friend was arrested for murder. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder without a trial. I still lay awake at night, haunted by the question of what evidence they found against him. It wasn't made public, and it didn't go to trial. I knew he never wanted to be a dad, but the thought of him intentionally taking that child's life, it's just unfathomable. That's a heavy story. It raises a lot of questions about the circumstances surrounding the child's death and the friend situation. It's tough to reconcile the image of someone you know with such serious allegations. The complexities of relationships and personal struggles add another layer to it all. It's a reminder of how fragile life can be and how things can turn out in unexpected ways. I had a drinking buddy named Bob right after getting out of the Navy. We met at work, and he seemed like a good guy. We spent a lot of time fishing, drinking, and partying together, getting pretty close along the way. But I'll never forget that one time at the gas station. We had been drinking, and out of nowhere, he hit his girlfriend right in front of me. I couldn't just stand there. I got up in his face, pulled him away, telling him it wasn't okay. He was furious, insisting it was none of my business. While we argued, his girlfriend jumped in her car and bolted. Not long after that, I met my wife. Bob teased me about disappearing into my new relationship, calling me pussy-whipped, but it was all in good fun. At least that's what I thought. Months passed, and I ran into Bob's older brother, Rufus. I asked how Bob was doing, only to be hit with the shocking news. Bob was in jail, awaiting trial for murder. Rufus explained that another girlfriend had attacked him, and her uncle and brother joined in, swinging a bat. During the chaos, she pulled a knife, and Bob managed to wrestle it away from her. But in the struggle, she got stabbed and died. Rufus mentioned a church was holding a fish fry fundraiser for Bob's defense the following Sunday. I considered going, but the whole thing fell off. Then I ran into another mutual friend, Warren, and brought up the fundraiser. That's when he laughed nervously and said, "Self-defense?" I repeated Rufus's story, and Warren looked at me, his face going pale. "Bob stabbed her 19 times, he said. I was absolutely floored. Suddenly, I couldn't shake the feeling that Bob's anger issues had been worse than I realized. I skipped the fundraiser. It felt way too awkward. That was back in 1989, and to this day, Bob still sits in Angola State Penitentiary. That's a pretty intense story. It's hard to wrap your head around how things escalated from hanging out to facing murder charges. Bob had some serious anger issues that probably led to this outcome. You were right to distance yourself after seeing that behavior. It's wild how quickly someone can go from being a friend to a cautionary tale. Life really changes in unexpected ways, doesn't it? My friend from college had a nightmare that turned real. They were just playing around with a pistol at home, goofing off. In a split second, it went off, the bullet struck him in the face, and he was gone just like that. At first, she told the police it was an accident, that he shot himself. But then she broke down, confessed she hadn't known it was loaded and they were just fooling around. They were supposed to be planning a beach trip that week, full of dreams, but instead, it ended in horror. The lawyer laid it out. He handed her the pistol, told her it was safe after removing the clip, and then they had overlooked a round in the chamber. That round took his life, right then and there. Now, a year later, she still has him listed as her boyfriend on Facebook. His face gazes back at her from a memorial profile picture. Only a handful of people checking on her now. She's spiraled. How could she not? She was once on the path to becoming a doctor. That dream shattered. Her scholarship ripped away. I didn't get caught in the crossfire of tragedy. This wasn't my burden to bear. But I felt a deep sorrow for my friend, for the joy that vanished, extinguished, leaving behind just shadows of what could have been. That's a tough situation. It's strange how quickly things can go wrong, especially with something as dangerous as a gun. The fact that they were planning a future together makes it even more tragic. It's hard to imagine the weight of that on her now, losing not just him, but her dreams and opportunities too. It's a chilling reminder about responsibility and the impact of mistakes. She was my best friend from ages 7 to 14, a whirlwind of charm with a dark edge. Always manipulative, often aggressive. It ended at 14 when I discovered she had been stealing from me. I still had to face her until 17 because of our soccer team, and let's just say it wasn't a pleasant experience. She definitely didn't like being caught. Fast forward about 10 years later, and I hear she's in jail, awaiting trial for something unimaginable, gang-related murder. It shook me to my core. We grew up in a nice neighborhood, far removed from that kind of world. Turns out, she started dating someone dangerous. Now, she's facing charges as an accessory to murder. Her role? Tracking down a person and giving intel for them to be hunted down. Now I work in a jail as part of the mental health team, and it's surreal to think I know someone living such a dark reality. Looking back, the signs of her instability were everywhere, but seeing her in this light still left me stunned. It's odd how some people can change so much. You think you know someone, and then they turn out to be completely different. The whole situation with your friend went from stealing to serious crime, which is a big leap. It's a reminder that people can have hidden sides. Working in a jail, you must see a lot of that. It's a strange connection to have with someone in such a dark place. One of my hockey teammates, a guy I shared a room with, turned out to be a monster. He killed 4 people, a young family, a dad, a mom, and their little baby. He set their apartment on fire while he was drunk. He only did a few years for that. When he finally got out, he didn't change. He stabbed another guy to death with a machete over a drug dispute. The worst part? I think he actually got the wrong guy. It was shocking, but this kid always acted like a gangster, talking constantly about how tough his friends were, how they did this and that, like it was all some kind of game. I realized you really do become who you pretend to be after a while. Well, Blake, congratulations. You're a gangster now. That's a pretty intense story. Sounds like a lot of people were affected by his actions. It's strange how someone can show such a different side, pretending to be something they're not. Living that lifestyle can lead to serious consequences. It's a good reminder that the image we project can come back to haunt us. My high school sweetheart, she moved on to a guy she had dated before me. Then one night, things took a dark turn. She shot him 5 times in the head, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she turned the gun on herself, ending it all with one final bullet. Nobody knows why. For days, I found myself lost in thought, reflecting on our time together. I reminded myself why I walked away from her. She was unpredictable, unstable, dangerously crazy. I realized I had been nothing more than her emotional crutch, never truly her romantic interest. Maybe if things had unfolded differently, she'd still be here. Or maybe, in a twisted sense, I had dodged a bullet myself. But why dwell on what can't be changed? What's done is done. That's a heavy situation. It's tough to deal with the loss and the memories that come with it. Reflecting on past choices can be hard, especially when something so tragic happens. It does sound like you recognize some red flags back then. It's hard to say what could have changed things, but it's good to focus on your own well-being now. Life moves on, I guess. I rented a room in a 3-bedroom house, right when I first moved out on my own. One of the rooms was always buzzing with people, loud parties almost every night. I ended up becoming friends with some of the regulars, drawn in by the chaos and energy. But one night, everything changed. The backroom crew moved to another house for a party, and that night, something terrible happened. A partygoer was shot in the head over a song of all things played on an iPod. The shooter? Someone I had gotten close to. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy, but his past was dark, shaped by a tough upbringing. I can't help but feel a chill run down my spine, thinking about how grateful I am that I turned down the invitation to that party. That sounds pretty intense. Living with people who have unpredictable lifestyles can lead to some wild situations. It's good to hear you avoided that party. Sometimes staying away from certain crowds is the right call. It's interesting how a nice person can end up in a bad situation due to their past. Glad you made it out unscathed. One of my best friends in high school became a murderer. He was kind, funny, and someone you'd always want by your side. He'd spent his whole life in foster care and was just starting to find his way. We even lived together briefly, and he never showed a hint of aggression, just a loyal friend. Then, one night, I got a call from a mutual friend, urging me to turn on the news. There he was, his face plastered across the screen. Police were looking for him because his girlfriend was found in a parking lot, her life stolen away by a blunt object. He had taken her car and vanished. A week later, she slipped into a coma and died. I felt this cold denial wash over me. This couldn't be possible. Someone so caring couldn't commit such a horrific act. But the truth unfolded as he was sentenced to life in prison at just 21. What haunted me most was how the media painted him as some uneducated brute. That couldn't be further from the reality I knew. Sometimes I think about reaching out to him, maybe even visiting, but the words escape me. What do you say to a friend who crossed that line? That's a pretty intense situation. It must have been hard to reconcile the person you knew with something so violent. It's strange how people can surprise you like that. Dealing with the aftermath has to be tough, especially with the media's take on him. Writing or visiting could provide some closure for you, but it makes sense to feel unsure about it. Just take your time in figuring out what you want to do. In the mid-1980s, a close friend of mine, just 17, got tangled up with a married woman. She was the kind of woman who craved pills, and her husband, a doctor, kept her stocked. Not the best setup, even back in '84. As their secret escalated, the doctor started catching on, worried about what was brewing under his roof. He decided to cut off her supply, but that only pushed her further into desperation. Days later, she lured my friend to their farm, claiming a cow had fallen and was injured. Once they were deep in the field, the trap was set. They turned on the doctor, mercilessly beating, stabbing, and shooting him to death, leaving his lifeless body behind like it meant nothing. When they tried to escape, their car got stuck in the muddy pasture. Desperate, they called a neighbor for help. It was this neighbor who noticed the blood splattered on the woman's shirt, raising suspicions, and soon after, he alerted the sheriff's department about the strange happenings. The authorities arrived and discovered the doctor's body lying in the creek. Within hours, both my friend and his twisted lover were arrested. They were charged with first-degree premeditated murder, condemned to death. Almost 30 years later, he's still sitting on death row. As for how I cope with all of this, I don't need to. The justice system took care of it. I'm just grateful that monster is locked away from society forever. This story is pretty wild. A teenager getting mixed up in something so dark. The whole situation with the pill addiction and the murder is unsettling. It's crazy how one bad relationship can lead to such a heavy outcome. The girlfriend's manipulation and the murder plot is intense. The justice system did step in, and it seems like a fitting end for someone involved in something so serious. Not much else to say about it. I had this friend from high school, the kind of guy you just clicked with. We hung out almost every day, and he was always so chill, never once getting mad, just a genuinely happy dude. Fast forward to 2010, and suddenly, I see his face plastered across the news. He killed his infant son. Apparently, the baby wouldn't stop crying, and it drove him so insane that he shook the little one until it died. Then there was another good friend from college, someone I was close to until everything started to change. He fell deep into hard drugs, crack, meth, coke, anything you could think of. I had to cut ties with him. Last year, I learned he stabbed his mom to death with a steak knife. He was high on meth at the time, and the details were gruesome. The autopsy report said her head was nearly severed, and she had been stabbed over 40 times. When I saw his face on the news, it felt like a knot twisting in my stomach, and I almost threw up. The revulsion of knowing that someone you once considered a brother could do something so horrific, it's a feeling that lingers, haunting me long after. That's really tough to process. It's strange how people can change so drastically. To know someone well and then see them in that situation must be unsettling. It sounds like you had some intense emotional reactions witnessing those events. The contrast between who they were and what they did can leave a big impact on anyone. It's a harsh reminder of the complexities of people. I dated a girl who seemed a bit off at first, but over time, her true nature revealed itself. It started with her accidentally hitting me, but she had this twisted talent for making it seem like an accident. She studied my weaknesses, my boundaries, and then casually crossed them while pretending to be clueless. Those little violations began stacking up, becoming more frequent and bolder until one night, she lost it completely, beating me in front of friends. That was my breaking point. A few weeks later, I heard the chilling news. She had stabbed our mutual friend with a kitchen knife over a stupid argument about a DVD and went on a rampage, destroying everything in sight. I realized if I had stuck around, that could have easily been me on the receiving end of her fury. After I escaped her grasp, I buried myself in books about red flags of domestic abusers. It changed me. Now, I'm far more vigilant, even paranoid. Anyone who echoes her manipulative ways or dares to push my limits, I steer clear of them like they're a deadly virus. The only sliver of good that came from that twisted relationship is the knowledge that helps me defend myself from narcissists like her. That's a pretty intense experience. It's good you got out when you did. Recognizing those red flags is important for your own safety. Being cautious and protective is a smart way to handle things moving forward. It's unfortunate that you had to go through that to learn it, but at least now you have a clearer view of what to look out for in future relationships.